He said it so casually. "We don't need you at Thanksgiving." My own son, the boy I raised with all the love and care I had to offer. I calmly turned off the phone, but my heart felt as though it had been shattered into a million pieces. I'd invested years of my life into building a future for him, a future he'd just tossed aside like leftover turkey from last year's dinner. Growing up in the outskirts of Indianapolis, Thanksgiving wasn't just a holiday for me. It was a cherished tradition. My name is Margaret, and I'm a retired school teacher who spent over 3 decades shaping young minds. Every year I looked forward to the smells wafting from the kitchen, pumpkin pie baking, the unmistakable aroma of a turkey roasting just right. This year, however, those familiar scents would be mixed with the bitter sting of disappointment. My son Todd, an aspiring engineer, had always been the apple of my eye. From the time he was a toddler trying to assemble Lego blocks, his love for building things was obvious. When his college fees became too hefty, I decided to ease his burdens by taking over his student loans. Now, hearing his dismissive words echo in my mind, I felt that sense of betrayal deep within my bones. How did it come to this? The daily routine of checking in on my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, always brought me some solace. She'd often share stories about her travels around the U.S. in her younger days, and her laughter would remind me of brighter times gone by. Our small neighborhood still felt like a tiny piece of that old America where everyone knew everyone else's names and stories. Yet, despite these small moments of connection, the chasm between Todd and me had become a shadow, darkening every corner of my life. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you love dearly, if you've had to make tough decisions that weigh heavily on your heart, join me on this journey. Subscribe to my channel, and let's unravel these knots together. Because sometimes, the hardest roads lead to the most enlightening destinations. As I sat there, staring at the silent phone in my hand, the weight of Todd's words pressed down on me like a cold, unrelenting fog. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that amplifies every creak of the floorboards and every sigh that escapes your lips. I glanced around my living room, the walls adorned with decades of memories, photographs of Todd's graduation, a framed drawing he'd made in 3rd grade of our family holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Each item was a stitch in the fabric of our life together, now fraying at the edges. How could he so easily cast me aside, as if I were nothing more than a relic of a past he no longer needed? I stood up slowly, my knees protesting as I made my way to the kitchen. The counter was still dusted with flour from the pie crust I'd started earlier that morning, a futile attempt to keep the Thanksgiving spirit alive. I could almost hear the echoes of past holidays, Todd's laughter as he sneaked a taste of the cranberry sauce before it was ready, or the way he'd beg to help carve the turkey even when he was too small to hold the knife properly. Those memories were a balm once, but now they stung, sharp and bitter. I wiped my hands on my apron, though there was nothing to clean. Just a need to do something, anything, to distract myself from the ache in my chest. Todd's words weren't just a rejection of Thanksgiving. They were a rejection of me. I'd poured everything into him, every penny, every late night spent worrying over his grades, every sacrifice made without a second thought. When his student loans piled up, I didn't hesitate to step in. I took on extra tutoring jobs after retirement, cut back on my own expenses, all to make sure he could chase his dreams without the burden of debt hanging over him. And now, what did I get in return? A cold, dismissive, "We don't need you." I shook my head, trying to push the thought away, but it clung to me like damp autumn leaves sticking to the soles of my shoes. I knew Todd hadn't always been this way. Growing up, he was a sweet boy, always eager to please, always quick with a hug or a "thanks, Mom." But something had shifted in recent years, especially after he moved out to Chicago for his engineering job. He started dating a woman named Lauren, someone I'd only met once over a rushed brunch last spring. She seemed nice enough, with a sharp smile and a way of speaking that felt calculated, like every word was chosen to impress. Todd had changed around her, becoming more distant, less patient with my calls or visits. I told myself it was just the natural progression of life. Kids grow up, they build their own worlds. But deep down, I sensed something else, something colder in his tone, something that felt like resentment. I decided to take a walk, needing to clear my head. The November air in Indianapolis was crisp, biting at my cheeks as I stepped outside. My neighborhood hadn't changed much in the 30 years I'd lived here. The same modest ranch-style houses lined the street, their porches decorated with pumpkins and corn stalks, a nod to the season. I waved at Mr. Carter across the road, who was raking leaves into neat piles while his grandchildren played nearby. He gave me a nod, but I could tell he sensed something was off. I forced a smile and kept walking, my thoughts drifting back to Todd. Lauren. Her name kept popping into my mind, unbidden. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was part of this, that she'd somehow influenced Todd's decision to exclude me from Thanksgiving. I remembered the way she'd looked at me during that brunch, her eyes scanning me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve, or dismantle. There was a moment when Todd had excused himself to take a call, and Lauren had leaned in, her voice low and sugary. "You've done so much for Todd," she'd said, her tone dripping with something I couldn't quite place. "He's so lucky to have a mom who's always there." It sounded like a compliment, but there was an edge to it, a subtle jab that made me feel like I was overstepping just by existing. I'd brushed it off then, but now, replaying it in my mind, I wondered if that was the start of something more sinister. As I walked past Mrs. Johnson's house, I noticed her sitting on her porch, bundled in a quilt and sipping from a steaming mug. She spotted me and waved me over with a grin. "Margaret, come keep an old lady company for a spell," she called out, her voice warm as ever. I hesitated for a moment, not sure I was in the mood for conversation, but her kindness was hard to refuse. I crossed the street and settled into the rocking chair beside her, accepting the offer of hot cider she poured from a thermos. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, dear," Mrs. Johnson said after a moment, her sharp eyes studying me over the rim of her mug. I sighed, knowing I couldn't hide much from her. She'd been my neighbor for over 20 years, and in that time, we'd shared countless stories. Of joy, of loss, of everything in between. I took a sip of the cider, letting the warmth seep into me, and then I let it all spill out. "It's Todd," I started, my voice quieter than I intended. "He told me they don't need me at Thanksgiving this year." Just like that, over the phone, like it was nothing. I paused, the words catching in my throat. "I've always been there for him, you know? Paid off his loans, supported him through everything, and now I feel like I'm just a burden to him." Mrs. Johnson's face softened, but there was a flicker of something else in her expression. Anger, maybe, or indignation. "That boy doesn't know what he's got," she said firmly, setting her mug down with a small clink. "You've given him everything, Margaret. Everything. And for him to turn around and say something like that, it's not right. Have you talked to him about it? Really talked?" I shook my head, staring at the amber liquid in my cup. I don't even know how to start. He's so different now, so distant. I think it might have something to do with Lauren, his girlfriend. I don't know. There's just something about her. The way she looks at me. The little comments she makes. I can't help but feel like she's pushing him away from me. Mrs. Johnson nodded slowly, her lips pursed. "Sometimes people come into our lives and they don't have our best interests at heart. They see a bond like the one you have with Todd, and they feel threatened by it. Or worse, they see it as something to exploit. You've got to be careful, Margaret. But don't let her win. Don't let her drive a wedge between you and your boy without a fight." Her words stayed with me as I walked home, the sky darkening with the promise of an early winter chill. I thought about the dining table in my house, an old oak piece my late husband and I had bought when Todd was just a baby. It was more than furniture to me. It was a symbol of our family, of the countless meals we'd shared, the laughter, the arguments, the reconciliations. Every Thanksgiving, that table was the heart of our home, groaning under the weight of food and stories. The thought of it sitting empty this year, of Todd and Lauren carving their own turkey somewhere far away without me, was almost too much to bear. That table represented everything I'd fought for, everything I'd built, and now it felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Back inside, I tried to distract myself with chores, folding laundry and dusting shelves, but my mind kept circling back to Todd. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his rejection than just a desire for independence. There was a hardness in his voice when he'd said those words, a sharpness that felt personal, almost spiteful. I wondered if Lauren had said something to him, planted seeds of resentment about all I'd done for him. Or worse, what if Todd himself had grown to see my sacrifices as a burden, as something he owed me for, something he wanted to escape? The next day, I decided to call him. I couldn't let this fester any longer. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, each ring stretching into eternity. When he finally picked up, his voice was clipped, impatient. "Hey, Mom, what's up? I'm kind of in the middle of something." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone steady. "Todd, I just wanted to talk about Thanksgiving. What you said the other day, it really hurt me. I've always looked forward to spending that day with you. And I don't understand why you'd say you don't need me there." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear him weighing his words. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than before. "Look, Mom, Lauren and I just want to do our own thing this year, okay? We're trying to build our own traditions. It's not personal. You've always been a lot, you know, always hovering, always needing to be involved. We just need some space." His words cut deeper than I'd expected, each one a tiny blade slicing through the fragile hope I'd been clinging to. "Hovering," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Todd, everything I've done has been for you. I took on your loans. I supported you through college. Yeah, and I didn't ask you to do that, did I?" He interrupted, his tone sharp now, almost venomous. "You made that choice, Mom. I appreciate it. I do. But I don't owe you for it. I'm trying to live my life, and I can't do that with you hanging over me every step of the way. Lauren thinks it's best if we set some boundaries, and I agree." I felt the ground shift beneath me, the phone nearly slipping from my hand. Lauren. Of course, she was behind this. I could picture her now, whispering in his ear, twisting my love for him into something suffocating. Something to resent. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that I'd never meant to smother him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I heard myself say, "Fine, Todd. If that's what you want, I'll give you your space." And then I hung up, the silence that followed heavier than ever. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, my mind racing. Todd's resentment wasn't just a passing mood. It was something deeper. Something that had been simmering for who knows how long. And Lauren, she wasn't just a bystander in this. She was the catalyst, the one fanning the flames. I thought about the student loans, the payments I'd been making faithfully every month, even as my own savings dwindled. I'd done it out of love, out of a desire to give him a clean slate. But now I wondered if he even cared. Did he see it as a gift, or as a chain binding him to me? Over the next few days, I tried to focus on the mundane. Grocery shopping, knitting a scarf for Mrs. Johnson's granddaughter, anything to keep my hands busy and my thoughts at bay. But the hurt lingered, a constant companion. I found myself avoiding the dining room, unable to face that empty table, the symbol of everything I was losing. It wasn't just wood and varnish. It was the heart of our family, the place where we'd weathered every storm together. And now, it felt like a gravestone marking the end of that bond. One evening, as I was sorting through old mail, I came across a letter from the loan company. It was a statement, showing the remaining balance on Todd's loans. Still a hefty sum, despite the years of payments I'd made. I stared at the numbers, a bitter taste rising in my throat. I'd taken on this debt for him, and he couldn't even spare me a seat at his table. For the first time, a dark thought crept into my mind. What if I stopped paying? What if I let him handle it on his own, since he was so eager to cut me out of his life? I pushed the thought away, ashamed of myself for even considering it. But it lingered. A tiny seed of anger taking root. I decided to confide in someone else, someone who might understand. My old friend Clara had been a rock for me through the years, ever since we taught together at the same elementary school. She'd retired a few years before me, and now spent her days gardening and volunteering at the local library. I called her up, my voice shaky as I asked if she had time for a coffee. We met at a small diner near downtown Indianapolis, a place we used to frequent after long days of grading papers. Clara looked as vibrant as ever, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes crinkling with warmth as she saw me, but her smile faded when she noticed the strain on my face. "Margaret, what's wrong?" she asked, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I poured it all out. Thanksgiving, Todd's words, Lauren's influence, the loans. Clara listened quietly, her expression shifting from concern to outrage as I spoke. "That's not right, Margaret," she said when I finished, her voice firm. "You've given that boy everything, and for him to treat you like this, and with that girlfriend of his egging him on, it's not just ungrateful, it's cruel. You need to stand up for yourself. Show him you're not just some doormat he can walk all over." Her words echoed Mrs. Johnson's, and I felt a spark of resolve ignite within me. But it was quickly doused by doubt. "I don't know, Clara. I don't want to lose him completely. What if pushing back just drives him further away?" Clara shook her head, her gaze steady. "Sometimes, love means drawing a line. You've got to show him that respect goes both ways. And if this Lauren is behind it, you need to figure out what her game is. People don't just turn sons against their mothers for no reason. There's always something in it for them." Her words stuck with me as I drove home, the city lights blurring past me. What was Lauren's game? Was it jealousy, control, or something more calculated? I thought about the student loans again, about the sacrifices I'd made. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Todd. I pulled over to read it, my heart sinking as I saw his name on the screen. "Mom, Lauren and I were talking, and we think it's best if you stop with the loan payments. I'll take over from now on. It's time I handled my own stuff. Thanks for what you've done, but we've got this." I stared at the message, my breath catching in my throat. Thanks for what you've done. It was so clinical, so detached, like I was a bank teller closing out an account rather than his mother. And the timing. Right after our last call. Right after he'd made it clear I was a burden. It wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't just about independence. This was a deliberate cut, a way to sever one of the last ties between us. I could almost hear Lauren's voice behind the words, her influence dripping from every syllable. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove home in a daze, the weight of his message pressing down on me. When I walked into my house, I went straight to the dining room, staring at that old oak table. It seemed to mock me now, a reminder of everything I'd lost. I ran my hand over its surface, feeling the scratches and dents from years of use, each one a story, a memory. And then I made a decision, one I never thought I'd make. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the loan company's website. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling as I navigated to the payment settings. I could stop the automatic payments, let Todd take over as he'd so coldly suggested. But as I sat there poised to click, I heard his voice in my head again, sharp and dismissive. "We don't need you." And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I didn't just stop the payments. I called the loan company directly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'd like to remove myself as the primary payer on this account," I said, giving them Todd's information to transfer the responsibility fully to him. It wasn't just about the money. It was about showing him that actions have consequences, that love isn't a one-way street. But even as I hung up, I felt no relief, only a hollow ache. I'd struck back, yes, but at what cost? The next day, my phone rang, and Todd's name flashed on the screen. I answered, bracing myself for what was to come. "Mom, what the hell?" His voice was loud, angry, almost unrecognizable. "I just got a call from the loan company. They said you canceled the payments, that it's all on me now. Are you serious? After everything, you're just going to pull the rug out from under me like this?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Todd, you said you wanted space, that you wanted to handle your own stuff, I'm giving you what you asked for. I've carried this burden for years, and you made it clear you don't need me. So, I'm stepping back." There was a long silence, and then I heard it. A soft laugh in the background, unmistakably Lauren's. And then Todd spoke again, his voice dripping with something darker than anger, something like contempt. "You know, Lauren was right about you. You're manipulative, always playing the victim. You think you can guilt me into keeping you in my life by pulling stunts like this? It's pathetic, Mom. Honestly, I'm glad we're doing Thanksgiving without you. It's better this way." His words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I couldn't speak. Couldn't even breathe for a moment. Pathetic. The word echoed in my mind. A final, cruel stab from the son I'd loved and sacrificed for. I heard Lauren's laughter again, sharper now, and I knew this wasn't just Todd speaking. It was her, through him, twisting the knife. I hung up without another word, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. I looked at the dining table again, its empty surface reflecting the emptiness inside me. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about gratitude, about family, but all I felt was betrayal, raw and unrelenting. I didn't know what would come next. Didn't know if there was any way to bridge the chasm between Todd and me. But one thing was clear. Lauren wasn't just a bystander. She was the architect of this pain, and I needed to find out why. Only then could I begin to fight for what was left of my family, or decide if it was even worth saving. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, the echo of Todd's cruel words and Lauren's sharp laughter reverberating in my mind. The dining room felt like a tomb, the silence suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My eyes were fixed on the old oak table, its worn surface a map of a life I no longer recognized. Pathetic. That word clawed at me, tearing open wounds I didn't even know I had. I'd spent decades building a family, pouring my heart into Todd, and now, in a matter of days, it felt like everything had been reduced to ash. Lauren's influence was undeniable, a poison seeping into every crack of my relationship with my son. I didn't know how to fight it, didn't even know if I had the strength to try, but as I sat there, a flicker of something, anger, maybe, or desperation, began to stir within me. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, the kind that makes even getting out of bed feel like a monumental task. I shuffled to the kitchen, brewed a pot of coffee, and stared out the window at the gray November sky. Indianapolis was quiet, the world outside moving on as if nothing had changed, while inside me, everything felt shattered. I thought about calling Todd again, begging him to reconsider, to at least talk to me without Lauren's shadow looming over us. But the memory of his contempt stopped me cold. I couldn't bear to hear that tone again. Couldn't stomach the thought of Lauren's laughter in the background, mocking my pain. Instead, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out an old photo album from the bookshelf in the living room. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed at the edges, but as I flipped through them, the memories came flooding back. There was Todd as a toddler, his chubby hands reaching for a slice of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, his face smeared with whipped cream. Another photo showed him at 10, proudly holding up a turkey leg as if it were a trophy, my late husband laughing beside him. Each image was a reminder of what we'd been, of the bond I thought was unbreakable. I traced my finger over a picture of the three of us, me, Todd, and his father, sitting at that same oak table, the centerpiece of every holiday, every celebration. How had we come to this? How had I lost him so completely? I was still lost in thought when the doorbell rang, startling me out of my reverie. I wiped my eyes, not realizing until that moment that I'd been crying, and made my way to the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Johnson standing there, a concerned look on her weathered face, a covered dish in her hands. I opened the door, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Margaret, I thought you might need some company," she said, her voice as warm as the casserole she held out to me. "Made some chicken noodle bake, comfort food for tough times. Can I come in for a bit?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in, grateful for the distraction even if I wasn't sure I could handle conversation. We settled in the living room, the photo album still open on the coffee table. Mrs. Johnson glanced at it, her eyes softening as she saw the pictures of Todd. "He was such a sweet boy," she said quietly, then looked up at me. "Have you heard from him since?" I shook my head, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. "Not really. Just that last call, when he found out about the loan payments. He was so angry, said I was manipulative, pathetic. And Lauren, she was there, laughing in the background. I can't get that sound out of my head." Mrs. Johnson's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "That girl's trouble, Margaret. I've seen her type before. She's not just pulling Todd away from you. She's trying to erase you from his life altogether. You can't let her. You've got to fight for your boy, even if he doesn't see it right now." Her words echoed Clara's from a few days before, and I felt that same spark of resolve flicker again, though it was still overshadowed by doubt. "How do I fight, though?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He doesn't want me in his life. He made that clear." And with Lauren there, whispering in his ear, "I don't even know if there's anything left to salvage." Mrs. Johnson reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "You start by standing your ground. You've already taken a step with the loans. Showed him you're not just going to roll over. But it can't stop there. You need to get to the bottom of what Lauren's after. People like her always have an agenda. Find out what it is, and you'll have something to work with." I nodded slowly, her advice sinking in, though I still felt lost. After she left, I sat with the casserole untouched on the counter, my mind racing. What was Lauren's agenda? Was it just control over Todd, or was there something more? I thought about the loans again, about how quickly Todd had texted me to say he'd take over, almost as if it had been planned. And then there was Thanksgiving, the holiday that had always been ours, now stolen away by her influence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a single holiday, or even the loans. It was about power, about Lauren asserting herself as the new center of Todd's world, pushing me out entirely. Over the next few days I tried to keep busy, but the hurt and anger simmered beneath the surface. I avoided the dining room altogether, unable to face that empty table. Instead, I spent hours in the garden, raking leaves and trimming back the last of the autumn flowers, letting the physical work numb my mind. But even that couldn't keep the thoughts at bay forever. One evening, as I was sweeping the porch, my phone buzzed with a new message. My heart leapt, hoping against hope that it was Todd, reaching out to apologize, to mend things. But when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It wasn't Todd. It was Lauren. "Hi, Margaret. It's Lauren. I know things have been tense lately, and I wanted to clear the air. Todd and I have been talking, and we think it's best if we handle everything on our own from now on. Not just the loans, but all of it. We'd like you to sign over any joint accounts or shared assets you might still have with Todd. It's just cleaner this way, for everyone. I've attached a document with the details. Please look it over and get back to me soon. Thanks." I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Joint accounts? Shared assets? There weren't many, just a small savings account I'd set up for Todd when he was a child, something I'd added to over the years for emergencies, and a few old bonds in both our names. But the audacity of her request, the cold business-like tone, hit me like a slap. This wasn't just about independence or boundaries. This was a calculated move to sever every last tie between me and my son, to strip away even the smallest remnants of our history together. And the fact that it came from Lauren, not Todd, made it clear who was really pulling the strings. I opened the attached document, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the legalese. It was a formal request to transfer full ownership of the savings account and bonds to Todd, with a space for my signature at the bottom. There was even a note suggesting I consult a lawyer if I had questions. As if this were some routine transaction, and not a gutting of our relationship. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, followed by a burning anger I hadn't felt in years. This was the final straw, the ultimate indignity. Lauren wasn't just content with taking Thanksgiving or turning Todd against me. She wanted to erase every trace of my presence in his life, down to the last penny I'd saved for him. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, the phone still in my hand, and let the anger build. This wasn't just a request. It was a demand. A power play meant to humiliate me, to show me just how little I mattered. And I knew, deep down, that if I signed those papers, I'd be giving up more than money. I'd be surrendering the last piece of the bond I'd fought so hard to maintain. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. After a sleepless night, I made up my mind. I typed out a response to Lauren, my fingers steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Lauren, I've received your message and the document. I'm not signing anything. Those accounts and assets were set up for Todd out of love, and they stay as they are until he speaks to me directly about this. If you or Todd have something to say, I'm here to listen, but I won't be pressured into cutting myself out of his life. That's my final word. I hit send, my heart pounding as the message went through. It felt like a small victory, a line drawn in the sand, but I knew it wouldn't be the end of it. Lauren wasn't the type to back down. And Todd, well, I didn't even know where he stood anymore. I needed to hear from him, to know if this was really what he wanted, or if she was speaking for him entirely. So, I decided to reach out one last time, to appeal to the boy I'd raised, the one who'd once looked at me with love and trust. I called Todd, my nerves fraying with each ring. When he finally answered, his voice was curt, almost annoyed. What is it, Mom? I'm busy. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone calm despite the hurt bubbling up inside me. Todd, I got a message from Lauren about signing over the savings account and bonds. I need to hear it from you. Is this what you want? Do you really want me to step out of your life completely, like this? There was a long pause, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. Lauren's, no doubt. When Todd spoke again, his words were clipped, rehearsed, as if he were reading from a script. Yeah, Mom, it's what I want. Lauren and I are building our own life, and we need a clean break. Just sign the papers. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. The casual dismissal stung more than I could have imagined. I felt tears prick at my eyes. But I refused to let them fall, not while he could hear me. Todd, those accounts were for you, for your future, something I built because I love you. I'm not signing anything until we talk about this face to face, without anyone else in the room. I deserve at least that much respect after everything I've done for you. His sigh was heavy, laced with irritation. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Lauren said you'd react like this, that you'd try to guilt me into keeping things the way they are. I'm not falling for it. Just sign the damn papers, Mom, or we'll figure out another way to handle it. And then he hung up, the line going dead before I could respond. I sat there, stunned, the phone slipping from my hand onto the table. Lauren said you'd react like this. Her influence was everywhere, poisoning every word that came out of his mouth. I felt a surge of anger, not just at her, but at Todd for letting her manipulate him so completely. I'd hoped, foolishly, that he'd at least hear me out, that some part of the boy I knew was still in there. But that hope was crumbling, and with it, my resolve to stay quiet. I knew I couldn't face this alone. Not anymore. I needed someone in my corner, someone who could help me see through the fog of hurt and betrayal. So, I called Clara again, hoping she could offer some clarity. We met at the same diner, her familiar face a small comfort in the storm of my thoughts. I told her everything. Lauren's message, the document, Todd's cold response. Clara listened, her expression darkening with every word. Margaret, this isn't just about money, she said when I finished, her voice low and intense. This is about control. Lauren's trying to cut you out of Todd's life completely, and he's letting her. You can't sign those papers. You can't let her win. I'm not signing, I said firmly, the decision solidifying as I spoke. But I don't know what to do next. I tried talking to Todd, and it's like he's not even there anymore. It's just her voice coming through him. I feel so alone in this. Clara reached across the table, her hand warm on mine, but her next words weren't what I'd hoped to hear. "I'm here for you, Margaret, you know that. But I can't fight this battle for you. I can give you advice, I can listen, but at the end of the day, this is between you, Todd, and that woman. You've got to stand up to them yourself, or they'll keep walking all over you." Her words, though kind, felt like a door closing. I'd hoped she might have some concrete solution, some way to intervene, but I realized now that this was my fight, and mine alone. As I drove home, the weight of that loneliness settled over me. Heavier than ever. I was on my own, facing a battle I wasn't sure I could win. That evening, as I sat in the living room, staring at the photo album again, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat, a wild hope flaring that it might be Todd, coming to talk, to apologize. But when I opened the door, I saw Lauren standing there, her sharp smile in place, a manila envelope in her hand. My stomach twisted at the sight of her, every instinct screaming to slam the door in her face. But I stood my ground, my voice cold as I spoke. "What are you doing here, Lauren?" She didn't flinch at my tone, her smile only widening. "I thought it might be easier to handle this in person, Margaret. I brought the paperwork for the accounts. Todd and I really need this finalized before Thanksgiving to start fresh. I'm sure you understand." She held out the envelope, as if expecting me to take it without question. I didn't move, my hands clenched at my sides. "I told you, I'm not signing anything." And I told Todd the same. "If he wants to discuss this, he can come here himself. I don't deal with messengers." Her smile faltered for a split second, a flicker of irritation crossing her face before she smoothed it over. "Margaret, let's not make this difficult. Todd's busy, and I'm just trying to help. This is for his future, for our future. You've done so much for him already. Don't you think it's time to let go? You don't want to hold him back, do you?" Her words were a dagger, twisting into the deepest parts of my insecurities, but instead of shrinking under them, I felt something inside me snap, a dam breaking after weeks of holding back. "Let go?" I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "I've spent my entire life building a future for Todd, sacrificing everything to make sure he had what he needed. And now you come here, acting like you're doing him a favor by cutting me out? I see through you, Lauren. This isn't about his future. It's about you controlling him, about pushing me out so you can have him all to yourself. You've turned my son against me, fed him lies about who I am, and I'm not going to stand for it anymore. You want those accounts? You'll have to drag me through a courtroom to get them, because I'm not signing a damn thing." Her eyes narrowed, the mask of politeness slipping as she stepped closer, her voice lowering to a hiss. "You think you're helping him by clinging to the past? You're suffocating him, Margaret. He's told me how much he resents you, how he's felt trapped by your so-called sacrifices his whole life. I'm giving him freedom, something you never could. So go ahead, keep fighting. It'll only make him hate you more." Her words were venom, meant to break me. But they had the opposite effect. They lit a fire in me, a rage I hadn't felt in years. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, my voice steady and cold. "You don't get to speak for my son. You don't get to tell me what he feels or what he needs. I raised him. I loved him. I gave up everything for him. And if he resents me for that, then he can tell me himself. But you're nothing but a parasite, feeding off his confusion, twisting his mind until he can't see straight. I don't know what you're after. Money, control, or just the thrill of breaking a family apart. But I'm done playing your game. Get off my porch and don't come back unless Todd is with you." For a moment, she looked taken aback, her composure cracking under the weight of my words. But she quickly recovered, her smile returning, though it was tighter now, forced. "Fine, Margaret. Have it your way. But this isn't over. Todd will get what's his, with or without your signature. And when he does, don't expect him to come running back to you." She turned on her heel, leaving the envelope on the porch as she walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I stood there, my heart racing, the adrenaline of the confrontation coursing through me. I bent down to pick up the envelope, my hands shaking not with fear, but with a newfound determination. I tore it in half without even looking at the contents, the sound of ripping paper a small, defiant act against her. As I watched her car disappear down the street, I knew this was far from over. Lauren wasn't going to stop, and Todd, my Todd, was still caught in her web. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a clarity I hadn't before. I wasn't just fighting for a seat at the Thanksgiving table or a savings account. I was fighting for my son, for the family I'd built, for the love that had defined my life. I walked back inside, closing the door behind me, and went straight to the dining room. The oak table stood there, silent and imposing, a witness to every joy and sorrow of our past. I ran my hand over its surface, feeling the weight of every memory etched into its wood. Lauren thought she could take this from me, thought she could erase me from Todd's life with a signature and a smile. But she was wrong. I wasn't done yet. I didn't know how I'd reach Todd, didn't know if I could break through the walls she'd built around him. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't giving up without a fight. Thanksgiving was just a day, but family, my family, was worth everything. And I was ready to do whatever it took to reclaim it. I stood there in the dining room, the torn envelope still in my hands, the remnants of Lauren's audacity scattered like confetti on the floor. The oak table, that steadfast witness to my life's joys and sorrows, seemed to loom larger now, a silent challenge to reclaim what I'd lost. My confrontation with Lauren had ignited something in me, a fire I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just anger, it was purpose. I knew I couldn't let her dismantle my family without a fight, but I also knew I couldn't do it alone. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was a war for my son, for the bond we'd built over decades, and I needed reinforcements. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a steely determination. I wasn't going to let Lauren's venomous words or Todd's cold dismissal be the final chapter of our story. I needed to protect myself, to protect what was left of my connection to Todd, and to do that, I needed professional help. I spent the early hours of the day researching family law attorneys in Indianapolis, looking for someone with experience in disputes over joint accounts and familial estrangement. After a few calls, I found a lawyer named Susan Hargrove, whose reviews spoke of her tenacity and compassion in equal measure. I booked a consultation for the following day, feeling a small weight lift off my shoulders, just knowing I was taking action. When I met Susan, I was struck by her no-nonsense demeanor. She was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake, her office cluttered with legal books and framed certificates. I poured out my story: Thanksgiving, the student loans, Lauren's demands, the joint accounts, and Todd's transformation under her influence. I laid out every detail, including the torn envelope and my refusal to sign over the savings account and bonds. Susan listened intently, jotting down notes, her expression unreadable until I finished. "Margaret," she said, setting her pen down and leaning forward, "you've got a strong case to maintain control over those joint assets for now. Legally, as a co-owner, you can't be forced to transfer ownership without your consent, especially not under duress or coercion, which it sounds like this Lauren is attempting. The bigger issue here is the emotional manipulation and potential alienation of affection. It's not a legal term in Indiana in the traditional sense, but we can build a case around undue influence if we can prove she's actively working to sever your relationship with Todd for her own gain." I nodded, absorbing her words, though the legal jargon felt like a foreign language. "What does that mean for me right now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "What can I do to protect myself and maybe get through to Todd?" Susan's gaze softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "First, we're going to draft a formal letter to both Todd and Lauren, stating your position on the joint accounts and bonds. It'll make clear that you're not signing anything without a direct in-person conversation with Todd, free of outside influence. We'll also request a mediation session, if you're open to it, to try and resolve this without escalating to court. Mediation isn't binding, but it can be a good way to get everyone in the same room with a neutral third party. Second, I'm going to look into Lauren's background. If she's pushing this hard for control over assets, there might be a financial motive or something else at play. I've seen cases like this before where a new partner tries to isolate someone from their family for personal gain. We need to know who we're dealing with. The idea of digging into Lauren's past felt both invasive and necessary. I didn't like the thought of spying, but I couldn't ignore the reality of her influence over Todd. "Do whatever you need to," I said finally. "I just want my son back, or at least to know if that's even possible." Susan gave me a small, reassuring smile. "We'll start with the letter and the background check. In the meantime, I advise you to step back from direct contact with Todd and Lauren. Don't engage, don't argue, don't respond to any more messages or surprise visits. Let me handle the communication through legal channels. It'll give you some breathing room and might force them to reveal more of their hand if they think you're pulling away. Sometimes, distance creates clarity for everyone involved." Her advice to step back felt counterintuitive, like I was abandoning the fight, but I trusted her judgment. Over the next few days, I followed her instructions to the letter. I didn't call Todd, didn't text, didn't even glance at my phone when it buzzed with notifications I knew were likely from him or Lauren. Instead, I focused on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I spent mornings walking through my neighborhood, the crisp November air clearing my head as I passed by familiar houses decorated for the upcoming holiday. I visited Mrs. Johnson again, not to vent, but to simply sit and listen to her stories of past Thanksgivings, letting her warmth remind me of what I was fighting for. I even started baking again, not for anyone else, but for me. Simple recipes like oatmeal cookies and banana bread, the act of measuring and mixing a quiet meditation. But the silence from Todd and Lauren didn't last long. A week after my meeting with Susan, I received a call from her office. "Margaret, I've got news," she said, her voice clipped with urgency. "We sent the letter, and we've had a response. Sort of. Lauren emailed back, not Todd, and she's doubled down. She's claiming that you're emotionally unstable and that Todd is prepared to pursue legal action to gain full control of the accounts if you don't sign them over. She's even suggested that they might seek a restraining order, alleging harassment based on your refusal to respect boundaries. It's a bluff, in my opinion, but it's aggressive. I've also got preliminary results from the background check, and there's something you need to know." My heart pounded as I gripped the phone tighter. "What did you find?" Susan hesitated for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. Lauren has a history of financial disputes. She's been involved in 2 prior relationships where she pushed for control over joint assets. And in one case, there were allegations of fraud, though nothing was proven, and the case was dropped. There's also a pattern of short-term engagements, relationships that ended abruptly after financial agreements were made. It's not definitive proof of wrongdoing, but it raises red flags. I think she's targeting Todd for more than just emotional control. Those accounts, the bonds, even the student loans you've been paying, they might be part of a larger scheme. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd suspected Lauren had an agenda, but hearing it laid out so starkly made it real in a way I hadn't anticipated. "So, what do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a growing resolve. "We keep pushing," Susan replied. "I'm drafting a response to her email, reiterating your stance and warning that any legal action on their part will be met with a countersuit for undue influence and emotional distress. We're also going to file a motion to freeze the joint accounts temporarily, to prevent any unauthorized access while this is resolved. And I'm scheduling the mediation session for next week, whether they agree to it or not. If they don't show, it only strengthens our position. For now, continue to hold your ground and let me handle the rest. If Lauren's desperate, she might overplay her hand, and that's when we'll have her." I agreed, feeling a strange mix of dread and hope. Freezing the accounts felt like a concrete step, a way to protect what was mine and Todd's. But it also meant escalating the conflict. I knew Lauren wouldn't take it lying down, and I braced myself for the fallout. True to Susan's prediction, the response came swiftly. 2 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox, not from Susan's office, but from a law firm in Chicago. It was a formal notice from an attorney representing Todd, stating their intent to pursue legal action if I didn't relinquish control of the joint accounts within 10 days. The language was cold, clinical, accusing me of obstructing Todd's financial independence and using familial ties as a means of control. I could almost hear Lauren's voice behind every word, her calculated malice dripping from the page. I didn't respond directly, forwarding the letter to Susan instead. She called me that evening, her tone calm but firm. "This is exactly what I expected, Margaret. It's intimidation, nothing more. They don't have a strong case, especially with the accounts being in your name as well. I've already filed the motion to freeze them, and it's been granted temporarily by a judge pending mediation. They can't touch the money right now, and if they push harder, we'll push back with evidence of Lauren's history. The mediation is set for next Tuesday. I strongly advise you to attend, even if they don't. It shows good faith on your part." I spent the days leading up to the mediation in a state of restless anticipation. I kept my distance from Todd and Lauren as Susan advised, but the silence was deafening. I couldn't help but wonder what they were saying about me, what lies Lauren was spinning to justify their actions. I busied myself with mundane tasks, cleaning out the attic, organizing old photo albums, anything to keep my mind occupied. But every night, I'd sit at the dining table, staring at its empty surface, imagining the Thanksgiving meals we'd shared there, wondering if I'd ever see Todd sitting across from me again. The day of the mediation arrived, a cold gray Tuesday just a week before Thanksgiving. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy blouse and slacks, wanting to appear composed even if I felt anything but. Susan met me at the mediator's office, a neutral space in downtown Indianapolis with sterile white walls and uncomfortable chairs. We waited in a small conference room. The mediator, a kind-faced woman named Ellen, explaining the process. She emphasized that this was a chance for open dialogue, not a courtroom, and that nothing said here was legally binding. I nodded, clutching a folder of documents Susan had prepared, including statements from the joint accounts and a summary of my contributions to Todd's loans over the years. Todd and Lauren arrived 10 minutes late, their faces set in matching expressions of irritation. Todd wouldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the table as he sat down across from me, Lauren at his side like a shadow. She, on the other hand, stared straight at me, her smile tight and predatory, as if daring me to speak first. Ellen began by outlining the purpose of the session, asking each of us to state our positions. I went first, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "I'm here because I love my son," I said, looking directly at Todd even though he wouldn't look back. "I've spent my life supporting him, financially and emotionally, and I've never asked for anything in return except to be a part of his life. These joint accounts, the bonds, they were set up out of love, for his future, and I'm not signing them over under pressure or coercion. I want to resolve this, Todd. But I need to hear from you, not through letters or someone else's words. I need to know what you really want, and why you're pushing me away." There was a long silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Todd shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting on the table. But before he could speak, Lauren cut in, her voice smooth and sharp. "Margaret, with all due respect, Todd has made his position clear. He wants independence, a clean break to build his own life with me. These accounts are a symbol of the past, of a dependency he's ready to move beyond. We've sought legal counsel because you've refused to respect his wishes, and frankly, your insistence on holding on to control is causing him distress. We're asking for a reasonable resolution, nothing more." Susan interjected before I could respond, her tone cutting through Lauren's polished facade. "Let's be clear. Margaret has every legal right to maintain her stake in these joint assets. There's no evidence of misuse or mismanagement on her part, only a pattern of support for Todd over decades. What we do have evidence of is a concerted effort to alienate Margaret from her son, including aggressive demands and questionable timing around financial matters. We've also uncovered information about Ms. Lauren's past that raises concerns about her motives. If this escalates to court, That information will be presented, along with a countersuit for emotional distress and undue influence. Lauren's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing, but she quickly recovered, leaning closer to Todd and whispering something I couldn't hear. He nodded, finally speaking, though his voice was flat, rehearsed. "Mom, I just want this over with. I don't want to fight, but Lauren's right. I need to move on. Sign the papers and we can all move forward. I don't want to drag this out." His words stung, but I refused to let them break me. I leaned forward, my voice soft but firm. "Todd, I've heard what Lauren wants, what your lawyer wants, but I haven't heard what you want. Not really. Look at me. Tell me, without anyone else speaking for you, why you're doing this. Why you're cutting me out of your life after everything we've been through. I deserve that much." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He looked away, shaking his head. "I've said what I need to say. Just sign, Mom, please." The mediation ended without resolution, both sides entrenched in their positions. Ellen concluded by noting that we could reconvene if desired, but Susan whispered to me that this was likely just a formality for their legal posturing. As we left the room, Lauren shot me a triumphant glance, as if she'd won some unspoken victory. But I held my head high, refusing to let her see my pain. Susan pulled me aside in the hallway, her expression grim but determined. "They're not backing down, but neither are we," she said. "The freeze on the accounts holds for now, and I'm moving forward with gathering more evidence on Lauren. Her reaction to my mention of her past tells me she's worried. We'll keep pushing. In the meantime, maintain your distance. Let them stew. If they think you're out of the picture, they might slip up." I nodded, taking her advice to heart. Over the next week, I retreated further, letting Susan handle all communication. Thanksgiving came and went. A quiet, lonely day, spent with a small meal I cooked for myself. Turkey for one. A single slice of pie. I didn't sit at the dining table. Couldn't bear to face its emptiness. Instead, eating in the kitchen with the radio on for company. But even as I mourned the absence of family, I felt a quiet strength growing within me. I wasn't giving up. I was biding my time. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Susan called with the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. "Margaret, we've got something solid," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. My investigator dug deeper into Lauren's financial history. Turns out she's currently under scrutiny for questionable transactions tied to a previous partner's estate. Nothing proven yet, but there's enough to suggest a pattern of exploiting relationships for gain. More importantly, we've got correspondence between her and a third party, a financial advisor, discussing how to access Todd's accounts once. They're fully in his name. It's not direct proof of fraud, but it's damning enough to show intent. I've compiled it into a dossier, along with affidavits from character witnesses, Mrs. Johnson and Clara, who've attested to your sacrifices and Lauren's manipulative behavior. We've got a document of power here, something we can use to turn the tables. I felt a surge of hope, tempered by caution. What does this mean? Can we use this to stop her? Susan's reply was resolute. It means we confront them with it. I'm drafting a formal notice, not just to Todd and Lauren, but to their attorney, presenting this evidence and demanding they cease all attempts to pressure you into signing over the accounts. We're also filing for a protective order on your behalf, citing emotional harassment and potential financial exploitation. If they push back, we take it to court, and with this dossier, we've got a strong case for undue influence. I'm scheduling a final meeting in my office next week. I want you there when we lay this out. It's time to end this. The day of the meeting arrived, a cold December morning with snow dusting the streets of Indianapolis. I felt a mix of nerves and determination as I walked into Susan's office, the dossier in her hands like a weapon forged from truth. Todd and Lauren arrived with their attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, their expressions a mix of defiance and unease. Susan didn't waste time, laying out the evidence with clinical precision, the financial history, the correspondence, the affidavits. She concluded by placing the dossier on the table, her voice unwavering. Margaret has endured months of emotional manipulation and coercion, orchestrated by Ms. Lauren with the apparent goal of financial gain. We have evidence suggesting a pattern of behavior that predates her relationship with Todd, and correspondence indicating intent to exploit his assets. We're prepared to escalate this to court, where this dossier will be presented in full, alongside a countersuit for emotional distress and a request for a permanent protective order. Alternatively, we propose an immediate cessation of all demands regarding the joint accounts and bonds, with a legally binding agreement that Margaret retains her co-ownership rights indefinitely, unless Todd personally, and without coercion, negotiates otherwise in the future. The choice is yours. The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of Susan's words settling over everyone. Lauren's face paled, her usual composure cracking as she realized the depth of what was against her. Todd, for the first time in months, looked uncertain, his eyes darting between the dossier and me. Their attorney cleared his throat, murmuring something to Lauren, who shook her head sharply, her voice low but audible. "This is ridiculous. They're bluffing. We can fight this." But Todd spoke up, his voice quieter than I expected. "Lauren, stop. I need to think about this." He turned to me, finally meeting my gaze, and I saw something there. Confusion, maybe regret. "Mom, I didn't know about all of this. I thought you were just holding on too tight. I need time to process this." Susan didn't let the moment slip. "Take all the time you need, Todd, but understand that Margaret isn't the enemy here. She's fought for you, even when you pushed her away. We'll draft the agreement to protect her rights, and you can review it with your own counsel, independent of Ms. Lauren's influence. We're done with games." The meeting ended with their attorney agreeing to review the proposed agreement, though Lauren's glare as they left told me she wasn't done fighting. But something had shifted in Todd, a crack in the wall she'd built around him. Over the next few days, Susan finalized the agreement, and to my surprise, Todd signed it without further protest, securing my co-ownership of the accounts and bonds. Lauren's influence seemed to wane in the face of the evidence, and though she didn't disappear from his life immediately, I heard through mutual acquaintances that their relationship was strained. Her past catching up with her as Todd began to question everything. The victory was clear and just, a legal resolution to the financial battle that had symbolized so much more. But it was the moral victory that truly healed me. A week after the agreement was signed, Todd called me, alone, no Lauren in the background. His voice was tentative, raw with emotion. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let her get in my head. I saw the things Susan showed us, and I started looking into stuff myself. I didn't realize how much she was pushing me, how much I hurt you. I don't know if we can fix everything, but I want to try. Can we talk? Really talk?" Tears streamed down my face as I listened, but they were tears of relief, of hope. "Of course, Todd. I've always been here. Let's start over, one step at a time." We met a few days later at a small cafe, just the two of us, and though the conversation was awkward, it was honest. He admitted to feeling overwhelmed by Lauren's intensity, to resenting me not for my sacrifices, but for the guilt they sometimes stirred in him, a guilt she'd weaponized. We didn't solve everything in one meeting, but it was a beginning, a bridge rebuilt from the ashes of our past. With the conflict behind me, I felt a weight lift, a freedom I hadn't known in months. I returned to the dining room, to that old oak table, and decided to reclaim it as a symbol of renewal rather than loss. On a quiet Sunday, I set the table for one, not with sadness, but with intention. I cooked a small meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a slice of pie, and sat there, surrounded by memories, but no longer haunted by them. I ran my hand over the table's surface, feeling every scratch and dent, and smiled. This was my space, my history, and no one could take that from me. I'd fought for it, for Todd, for myself, and I'd won. And so, as I sit here now, reflecting on this long, painful journey, I realize that justice, even when it comes late, can mend what's broken. If my story has touched you, if it's made you think about the bonds of family and the battles we fight for them, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a like if you felt this with me, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up to someone trying to tear your family apart? How did you find the strength to fight? Share your stories. I'm listening. And if you want to hear more tales of resilience and redemption, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the ones you love.